what is currently written in the PCA about the suspect that constitutes probable cause in the state of Idaho. This is an introduction to Brett Payne's affidavit of probable cause and the components thereof. As far as we can tell, Payne determines that probable cause is met based on the following. Surviving roommate, Dylan Mortensen, is said to have seen a male with bushy eyebrows leaving the house where the murders occurred. Brett Payne said he believes that Kohberger is that person, after looking at Kohberger's driver's license. This happened between November 25th and November 29th of 2022. Bryan has a white Hyundai Elantra that did not match the year of vehicle that law enforcement was looking for throughout the investigation. According to what was being shared with the public, police had previously been looking for 2011-2013 Elantra. The defendant's vehicle does not fit that description. Although there are reports that the defendant's phone was not located in the area during the times that the murders were taking place, the absence of such digital proof has been replaced with accusations from the lead investigator in the case. Making accusations without any proof of guilt is at most suspicion, lies, or else desperate paranoia. The state claims that they have proof to support their allegations against Kohberger, but not enough to share with the defense. If you watch our video Brett Payne's escape route number 3, and also phone 8458, you'll see for yourself how we broke down Payne's miscalculations of time, location, and distance, exposing him as the mistake-ridden witness as he truly is. The fourth component to the state's assertion of probable cause is a claim that there was trace DNA that was allegedly left behind on a snap button of all places, belonging to a sheath that would normally house a straight-edged knife. Have you ever wondered about what the hands of the actual perpetrators must have looked like days and weeks afterwards? For this presentation, our primary focus will remain on Payne's physical description of Kohberger, the physical attributes belonging to Kohberger that supposedly stood out as unusual or significant enough to make the word selection of Brett Payne in his affidavit of probable cause. My name is Annette. Thank you.
New developments in the murders of 4 students from the University of Idaho. Law enforcement sources telling ABC News they identified suspect Bryan Kohberger by linking DNA evidence from the crime scene to a public genealogy database. And tonight, what we've just learned about that cross-country road trip the suspect made with his father. ABC's Kana Whitworth in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania.
The man accused of stabbing 4 college students to death set to appear before a judge within hours, waiving extradition and paving the way for his swift return to Idaho. The lawyer for 28-year-old Bryan Kohberger says his client maintains his innocence.
He's certainly eager to get back to Idaho to start the legal process, and he believes that he will be exonerated when he does return.
Sources telling ABC News police were able to link Kohberger to the crime in part by running DNA from the crime scene through a public genealogy database. It's an investigative tool routinely used since the capture of the Golden State Killer. Police first finding relatives, then zeroing in on Kohberger, a PhD student studying criminology at Washington State University, just 15 minutes from the crime scene. Tonight, investigators processing Kohberger's white Hyundai Elantra. They say was spotted on surveillance near the crime scene. Kohberger and his father driving the car 2,500 miles from Washington to Pennsylvania, arriving at the family home a month after the murders.
I can tell you based on experience that cars months and sometimes years old, we've been able to find trace amounts of blood and DNA in a vehicle, despite the fact that the naked eye could not see it.
And for that part of the process, I want to bring in Cece Moore. She is an investigative genealogist. She's known as the DNA detective. She's helped identify more than 200 violent criminals. So Cece, this is tricky and it's fascinating, but you got this massive family tree, maybe 30 or 50 or 100 members of a family. Where do you start? How do you weed out which members of the family are innocent and which one is the one that matches what they found at the crime scene?
Well, taking a step back, it's not quite as simple as you just laid it out, because Ancestry DNA and 23andMe, which are the largest databases by far, actually bar law enforcement from using them. And so we are limited in this work to the 2 smallest genetic genealogy databases, which are GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA. And so we can only compare against a total of about 2 million genetic profiles. If somebody's DNA is being used for these cases, they have consented to that. In GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, they have been notified that law enforcement is using the databases, and they have opted in or not opted out in one case.
So there, the opting part, that's the fascinating part, because I know that early on in the 23andMe and Ancestry, it was kind of open season until they freaked out and thought, oh gosh, don't get our company involved in this. And then it became an option for us, the customer, to say, yeah, I'm fine. You can pop my DNA into any database, or no, you may not. Don't we have that option?
No. Ancestry DNA and 23andMe will not allow law enforcement to use their database, and it has never been used for investigative genetic genealogy, to my knowledge. And I'm pretty dialed in. I think I would know.
counts 2, 3, 4, and 5, murder in the first degree.
A legal battle over evidence playing out between Bryan Kohberger, working to clear his name in the murder of 4 University of Idaho students, and the state fighting to prove his guilt. In new court documents, Kohberger's attorney accusing the state of hiding its entire case by seeking to protect information about the genetic genealogy investigation they say led them to Kohberger.
The state here is using a relatively new kind of DNA technology. So this is exactly the kind of thing the defense will argue that they need, because if this is emerging technology, they need all the facts they can if they're going to challenge it.
In a court filing earlier this month, prosecutors said that Kohberger's DNA is a statistical match to DNA found on the knife sheath at the scene of the murders last November. In the filing, Kohberger's lawyer said that 2 additional males' DNA was found within the house, as well as another unknown male's DNA on a glove found outside the house, days after the murder. Kohberger's attorney also writing that police were investigating many various possible suspects, adding that many of them provided DNA and at least one had his DNA surreptitiously taken from a discarded cigarette.
Your Honor, we will be standing silent.
The judge entered a not guilty plea for Kohberger after he opted to stand silent at his arraignment. He's accused of murdering Madison Mogen, Kaylee Gonsalves, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin as they slept in an off-campus home in Moscow, Idaho on November 13th. An expansive gag order has blanketed the case since January, challenged by both the media and one of the victim's family's lawyers. On Friday, the judge upheld the gag order but narrowed it, allowing attorneys in the case to comment on matters like scheduling and correcting misinformation about their client. Tomorrow, both sides will face off in court again. As Kohberger's lawyers argue for the release of materials they say they need to defend the suspected killer.
Kohberger's defense team also claims prosecutors are hiding crucial parts of the investigation from them that they want to see, including the genetic genealogy the FBI used to build family trees that led them to the Kohberger family. Investigators say Kohberger's DNA was left on the snap of the K-bar knife sheath left next to Maddie Mogen's body. When the test result came back to a single source of male DNA, and it didn't result in a hit in a national database of known felons called CODIS, the FBI turned to genetic genealogy to try to find a suspect. The feds built the family trees from there, and that led them to Kohberger's father and later him. Prosecutors do not want to turn that information over to the defense and have asked the judge for a protective order. In fact, prosecutors cite another case when they claim they shouldn't have to turn over that information, but the defense is having none of it. Kohberger's attorneys say they should get to see the materials that led to their client being labeled a suspect. Kohberger's lawyers also say that 2 other DNA profiles from the King Road home were run through CODIS, along with a male DNA profile found on a glove outside of the home. Then we move on to the DNA part of this. The DNA part is them saying that what I find interesting, they're saying there's no DNA of the victims, and this is a crime that would have been incredibly bloody. We have 4 college students stabbed to death in a home. One of them, we know, Xana Kernodle, according to her father, fought back. So there was some type of altercation there with a knife, and yet the defense team is saying in this filing that there wasn't any of the victims' DNA in this case found in Bryan Kohberger's home, his office, his apartment, or his vehicle that the state says he was driving that night of the homicide. So would you expect, after a crime that is so bloody, it had to have been, that there would be no evidence of their victim's DNA in this vehicle?
That's actually very shocking if you're on the prosecution side of this. Yeah, that certainly helps the defense. Now, if there happens to be some evidence that he did some complete deep cleaning, that's one thing that could possibly mitigate that for the prosecution. But on its face, yeah, it definitely doesn't help the prosecution if there's really is no DNA from the victims in either Mr. Kohberger's car or at his home.
Another thing that I find interesting about all of this is the fact that the defense, they've received 51 terabytes of information from the prosecution. That includes video evidence, reports. They obviously have some DNA evidence, some DNA testing results back from the crime lab. They've been given that information, but they're saying the state is still trying to hide its case from them. And they're talking about the genetic genealogy that was used to identify a suspect in this case from that touch DNA that was found on the knife sheath laying next to Maddie Mogen's body. They cited a case, the Green case, where they said, oh, look at this other case. In that case, the prosecution wasn't required to turn over the genetic genealogy information to the defense, so we shouldn't have to do it either. What is your take on that? Because I find that confounding, that you would not have to, as the prosecution, you wouldn't be required to turn over evidence that led you to a suspect, and you're citing all this information, but you wouldn't turn it over to the defense so they could defend their client.
I think that's the fox guarding the hen house, expecting the judge to trust him. When the fox guarding the hen house says, trust me, you don't have to check on the hens. That definitely is what I'm thinking we have here by the state. Now, the defense cites a case of their own where they use the methodology from a facial recognition software, where another court found that had to be disclosed, and saying it shouldn't be disclosed to the defense to protect all those innocent people in the database and so on. That is completely going over the top. If they really feel the need to have those people protected, it can easily be done with a protective order where only counsel is allowed to view it.
I was wondering too, why wouldn't you just say only counsel can view this information, but we're going to turn it over? Why do you think that the prosecution is so loath to turn this over, James? Because I would think that this would be pretty discoverable. This would be kind of like Exhibit A of discovery that should be turned over. This is how you found our guy. This is how you determined or figured out or tried to find out that my client was the suspect. So why would they not want that information turned over? I understand they're saying, oh, we want to protect the identity of all these other relatives, but doesn't that seem like something that should be turned over?
It does. And again, that's where I use my fox guarding the henhouse analogy. They're basically saying, trust the fox who's guarding the henhouse to say he's not going after the hens without checking on the hens yourself. And even just real basic. Remember when we did math class when we were going up in school, it was always show your work. You don't just give an answer. And that's another analogy I'll use here. How did they get to that conclusion? The state definitely needs to turn that over so the defense can adequately investigate that. Given that this is a death penalty case, if the judge doesn't let the defense look at that stuff, he's asking for reversal on appeal.
The movie's about to start.
New at 6 tonight, Creme 2 is digging deeper into court documents that outline new movement in the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. In our effort to bring you more to every story, Creme 2's Shannon Mowdy spoke with a defense attorney about new filings that reference brady-giglio material.
New filings in the Moscow murder case show prosecutors have found and are now sharing with the defense possible brady-giglio material. Now, while much of the information is sealed, we do know it has something to do with a, quote, confidential internal affairs investigation of one of the officers in the case.
And it could be huge for the defense, or it could be totally meaningless. So since we don't know what it is.
Defense attorney John Henry Brown says brady-giglio means law enforcement and prosecutors have to turn over any evidence or information that may help the defense.
Actually, under Giglio and Brady, prosecutors have an obligation to look for such evidence.
Sometimes that's evidence which exonerates the accused. But with mention of an internal affairs investigation, it sounds like this case is about a potential challenge to the credibility of a police officer.
Most police departments have created what's called the Brady list. And on the Brady list are officers, detectives, internal personnel who have committed some sort of an error in the past, and that the defense should be told about it.
Brown cautions Brady-Giglio disclosures like this are pretty common because not handing over the information can get cases overturned. And the Brady-Giglio material referenced here may have nothing to do with the Moscow murder case itself.
It could be something as small as the DUI 25 years ago, or it could be something more serious. Obviously, the most serious thing for the prosecution, the state, would be if the officer, detective, or whatever has some history of not telling the truth.
KREM 2 News reached out to law enforcement in Idaho, Washington, and also in Pennsylvania, where the suspect was arrested, to try to find out which agency is involved. We've also submitted public records requests for more information. Shannon Moudy, KREM 2 News.
The next court date in this case is a preliminary hearing, and that is set for June 26th.
You've already been introduced to the horizontal layout of items that make up Brett Payne's probable cause rationale. I'm now gonna explain the vertical emergence of both verified and confirmed actions, on the part of law enforcement, that give rise to 14th Amendment issues concerning equal protection of the law that are directly related to Payne's items of discovery, featured in his affidavit. Here is the first action on the part of law enforcement that has led us to believe that the defendant in this case, Bryan Kohberger, was singled out by police and methodically denied equal protection of the law. Thank you for being patient.
Every day is so wonderful, and suddenly it's hard to breathe. Now and then I get insecure from all the pain. I'm so ashamed. I am beautiful, no matter what they say. Words can't bring me down. So don't you bring me down today. To all your friends, you're delirious, so consumed in all your doom. Trying hard to fill the emptiness, the pieces gone. I left the puzzle undone. I like the way it is. You are beautiful in every single way. Words can't bring you down. You are beautiful no matter what they say. Words can't bring you down. So don't you bring me down today.